Sometimes the past shows up precisely when we least expect it. And when it finally does, it serves a profound purpose. It reminds us of exactly how far we have come, or it gently reveals to us how much we are still healing. Marcus Varela was fiercely proud of his new fiancée, Celeste Raymond. He loved the way she looked on his arm, and he especially loved the way other men looked at him when he walked into a high society charity party with her by his side. She was a trophy, a symbol of his newly acquired status. But wrapped up in his own arrogance, what he didn't know was that his ex-wife, Elina Marques, had moved on too. And she had moved on with someone very, very special. Elina's new boyfriend, Lucien Armand, was so much more than just kind and smart. He was a billionaire, a quiet, profoundly powerful man who cared deeply for Elina and freely gave her the unconditional love and respect she had never experienced with Marcus. This story is not just a tale about love. It is a sweeping narrative about inner strength, the painful journey of healing, and the beautiful, deeply satisfying nature of a soft kind of revenge. Heavy rain hit the large glass windows of a cozy, dimly lit cafe on West 46th Street. Elina Marques sat quietly at a secluded corner table, her hands wrapped around a warm ceramic cup of cappuccino. It was unusually cold for a day in late May in New York City, and people continuously shuffled into the small shop to escape the sudden downpour, shaking off their umbrellas and rubbing their hands together for warmth. Elina wore a soft, oversized blue sweater and comfortably faded jeans. To anyone looking at her, she appeared the picture of calm, but deep inside, a familiar flutter of anxiety made her feel just a little nervous. Just 1 year ago, she was still heavily recovering from the emotional wreckage of her divorce. As the rain continued to weep down the window pane, she thought back to the agonizing days when she and Marcus had finally ended their marriage. They had been college sweethearts, full of bright-eyed ambition and promises of forever. But over the years, as his career demanded more of his soul, Marcus had changed. He became incredibly cold and mean, always trying to control every little aspect of their lives together. They fought constantly. They argued bitterly about money, about her work, and about the fundamental direction of their life. In the bitter end, the heavy weight of his emotional manipulation had caused their love to finally break apart. A loud, aggressive taxi horn from the busy street outside brought her snapping back to the present moment. She shook her head to clear the ghosts of the past and checked the screen of her phone. Lucien had sent a sweet message saying he'd meet her here right after his executive board meeting wrapped up. From the cafe, they were planning to walk over to her best friend Lynn's art show together. A soft smile touched Elina's lips as she thought of him. Lucien had always been so incredibly good to her. Unlike Marcus, he never made her feel small or insignificant. He truly listened when she spoke, valuing her opinions on art, business, and life. He genuinely cared about her dreams. And though he was a man of immense, staggering wealth, he never showed off. He wore his power like a quiet, well-tailored suit, always present but never loud. Just then, the small brass bell above the cafe door rang out cheerfully. Elina looked up with a bright smile, fully thinking it was Lucien coming in from the rain. But her heart suddenly stopped dead in her chest. It was Marcus. He walked in, vigorously shaking the rainwater off his expensive black umbrella. Marcus had not changed much at all. He was still tall, still walking with that infuriatingly arrogant confidence. And he still carried that same proud, entitled look in his dark eyes. Elina's stomach immediately felt tight. A wave of nausea, a feeling she hadn't had in a very long time, came rushing back, threatening to steal her breath. She briefly, desperately thought about hiding behind her large coffee cup, praying he would just walk to the counter and leave. But it was too late. He turned, and his eyes locked onto her. He saw her. "Elina," he said, striding purposefully toward her table with a smirk playing on his lips. "Wow. It's been a while." Marcus wore a dark gray, custom-tailored suit that looked incredibly expensive. His hair was neat, slicked back with product. No longer the boyishly messy style he had worn when they were married. He looked exactly like the wealthy, ruthless, Successful businessman he had always desperately wanted to be. Without asking for permission, he looked at the empty wooden chair across from her, pulled it out, and sat down heavily. He completely ignored the long line of cold, wet people standing near the door, waiting for available seats. That was so typical of Marques. He always inherently believed he deserved to be the absolute center of attention, regardless of who he inconvenienced. "Yes, it has been a while," Elina said, trying her hardest to sound perfectly calm. But beneath the table, her hands shook a little, so she slowly and carefully set her cappuccino cup down on its saucer to hide her trembling. It felt deeply strange and unsettling to see him again like this, invading her safe space. For a fleeting moment, she genuinely wondered how his life had been going. But then, almost instantly, the dark memories came flooding back. The screaming matches, the endless blame he placed on her for his own failures, the cruel, surgical way they had hurt each other in the end. She took a deep, steadying breath, inhaling the rich scent of roasted coffee beans in the air. She wasn't going to let the painful past control her present anymore. "You look good," Marques said, casually leaning back in his chair and crossing his arms. "I heard through the grapevine that you moved back to the city. How have you been?" He gave a small, practiced smile, but it looked entirely forced. They were absolutely not the same people anymore. The bridge between them had been burned to ash. "I'm doing fine," Elina said, keeping her tone polite but distant. "Just taking life one day at a time." "And you?" "Same here. I just came from a massive client meeting," he said, tapping the wooden table rhythmically with his fingers. He always had to ensure she knew how important he was. Then he paused. The arrogant mask slipped for a fraction of a second. "I know things didn't exactly end well between us." Elina held her breath, waiting for something sharp, an insult, a rude comment, a subtle dig at her career. That was his usual playbook. But surprisingly, he only cleared his throat and awkwardly wiped an invisible spot on the table with his thumb. Maybe, just maybe, deep beneath his ego, he actually felt a little guilty for the hell he had put her through. "I hope you're okay," he said at last, his voice dropping slightly. "I am," she replied gently, looking him in the eye. She wasn't entirely sure if it was 100% true in that exact moment, given the adrenaline spiking in her veins, but she desperately wanted it to be true. "Really, Marques? I'm okay." Just then, the heavy glass cafe door opened again. A gust of cold breeze and light rain swept into the warm shop. Elina looked up, and instantly, her heart skipped a happy beat. Lucien Armand walked in. He looked incredibly calm, impossibly tall, and quietly strong. His tailored navy blue blazer and matching crisp pants made him stand out right away amidst the crowd of damp tourists and tired locals. Lucien scanned the room and saw Elina right away. His handsome face immediately broke into a smile, warm, genuine, and entirely sure. Marques, noticing the sudden shift in Elina's demeanor, followed her gaze toward the door and frowned deeply. His face rapidly changed from a look of mild, arrogant confusion to something sharp and incredibly cold. He was looking at Lucien, thinking hard, his competitive instincts instantly flaring up. "Elina," Lucien said, his deep, soothing voice washing over her as he walked over calmly. "I am so sorry I'm late. The board meeting went a bit longer than I thought it would." Without hesitation, he reached down, gently touched her shoulder, and pressed a soft, lingering kiss to her cheek. It was just a soft, simple kiss, but it made Elina feel completely, overwhelmingly safe. It was as if she could finally breathe again after holding her breath for too long. Marques stiffened, raising one judgmental eyebrow. "So, this is..." Elina felt her chest tighten. This collision of her past and her present had come far too soon. "Marques, this is Lucien Armand. My boyfriend," she said, her voice only a little shaky, but gaining strength with every word. "Lucien, this is Marques Varela, My ex-husband. The air around the small corner table suddenly felt incredibly heavy, thick with unspoken tension. Exactly like the heavy atmosphere right before a violent thunderstorm is about to start. Lucien, however, stayed perfectly calm. He did not puff out his chest or act defensive. He simply reached out a large, steady hand to shake Marques's. "Nice to meet you," he said kindly, his manners impeccable. Marques reluctantly shook it, but absolutely not with warmth. "Likewise," he said sharply. He looked Lucien up and down, a blatant, calculating stare. Exactly like he was checking out a corporate rival before a hostile takeover. Something intense and silent passed between the two men in that brief handshake. Maybe it was unspoken respect, maybe it was bitter jealousy, or maybe it was both. Whatever it was, Elina felt the heavy vibration of it deep in her chest. "Well, I should really get going," Marques said quickly, standing up and abruptly checking his expensive watch. "I need to go pick up Celeste." The sudden mention of the name hit Elina like a small, unexpected electric shock. She vividly remembered Marques constantly, casually mentioning a beautiful, ambitious co-worker named Celeste near the very end of their marriage. Was this the same woman? Had it been going on back then? Or had Elina always known deep down that there was someone else waiting in the wings? Either way, the confirmation still hurt her pride. But Elina expertly kept her face calm and unbothered. She had learned the hard way how to hide her true feelings well. She had been forced to wear that blank, protective mask entirely too often when she was living with Marques. "Nice running into you, Elina," Marques said, buttoning his suit jacket. Then he nodded curtly at Lucien. "And nice meeting you. Maybe we'll see each other again around the city." Lucien gave a small, polite, thoroughly unbothered smile. "Maybe. Take care." Marques turned and walked out the door, pushing his way back into the rain. He left behind the strong, overpowering smell of his expensive designer cologne and a heavy cloud of unanswered questions. Elina closed her eyes and took a deep, shaky breath. The familiar scent instantly brought back a flood of toxic memories she absolutely didn't want in her head. Lucien smoothly pulled out the chair Marques had just vacated and sat across from her. He gently reached across the small table and took her trembling hand in his warm, solid grasp. "Are you okay?" he asked softly, his dark eyes searching her face with genuine concern. Elina exhaled and smiled a little, squeezing his fingers. She desperately didn't want this fleeting, awkward moment to ruin her otherwise beautiful day. "I'm okay. Just very surprised." Lucien squeezed her hand back, his thumb rubbing soothing circles over her knuckles. "If he ever bothers you, or if you ever feel like you need space from him, I'm here. I'll handle it." His voice was quiet. It wasn't angry or macho. It was just incredibly strong and deeply protective. "No, it's fine," she said quickly, shaking her head. "I am totally over him, I think." She let out a long, shuddering breath. Her chest still felt tight. Not because she missed Marques, she thanked God every day she was free of him, but because she grieved. The fact that she had once so fiercely loved someone who never really saw her worth. "Let's just go to the gallery," she said, picking up her purse and standing up. "Lynn's waiting for us, and I don't want to miss the opening." Lucien stood up too, towering over her, and tenderly helped her slip into her winter coat. He was always so effortlessly gentle like that. As they finally stepped outside into the wet, bustling street, sharing a large umbrella, Elina felt a massive storm of old, complicated feelings swirling inside her. Marques had physically left the cafe, but his sudden appearance had violently stirred up something dark that she wasn't quite ready to face. Elina felt so many conflicting thoughts spinning in her mind as she walked arm in arm with Lucien. She didn't know it yet, but seeing Marques again in that cafe was only the very beginning. Something incredibly big was coming on the horizon. Something full of buried secrets, old, lingering pain, and spectacular new chances. And when the storm finally hit, absolutely no one involved would walk away the same. 2 days later, The sun had finally returned to the city. Elina sat quietly in the sunniest, brightest corner of her spacious apartment. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor, slowly looking through heavy, dusty old photo albums she had hastily packed away in taped boxes immediately after the divorce. She honestly didn't know why she chose this specific, peaceful morning to open them. Maybe seeing Marques in the flesh had unexpectedly woken something deep and unresolved inside her. Memories flooded her mind, some incredibly sweet and nostalgic, but most of them deeply, brutally painful. Her phone buzzed loudly on the hardwood floor beside her. It was an urgent text message from her best friend, Linda, though everyone just called her Lynn. "Did you see the massive article in the Chronicle Society pages about Marques and Celeste's upcoming engagement party? It's going to be absolutely huge. Like front page, celebrity level huge. Are you okay?" Elina frowned, her heart sinking slightly, and texted back quickly. "I'm fine. Just really surprised because we actually ran into each other at a cafe yesterday." Lynn replied right away with a rapid-fire bunch of shocked, wide-eyed emojis. Then a new text bubbled up. "He's totally, shamelessly showing off Celeste to the world. People in the industry say she's from a massive, old-money, big-name family out of Boston. They're throwing a super fancy, ridiculously expensive event next month at the Four Seasons. If you want backup, or if you just want to drink wine and vent, I'm your girl." Elina sighed deeply, resting her head against the wall. So this was it. Marques still desperately, pathetically cared about looking rich, important, and powerful to the outside world. He had clearly turned his engagement to this wealthy woman into a big, flashy public show to boost his own ego. And deep inside Elina, something stung. It wasn't jealousy over him, but rather a small, quiet, melancholic ache for the past. She vividly remembered the late night, whispered talks they used to have when they were poor and happy, about simply renewing their vows on a quiet beach for their 10th anniversary. Just family, just close friends, just pure love. That naive, sweet dream was permanently gone now, turned to ash. In its place was his shiny, new, glittering, superficial life with someone else entirely. She turned a heavy, plastic page in the album. There it was, a candid, faded photo from their early college years. Marques, looking carefree with messy hair and bright, eager eyes, was hugging her tightly from behind outside their brick dorm building. They had looked so incredibly young, so deeply in love, and so foolishly sure they would last forever. How did it all go so terribly, irreparably wrong? She aggressively snapped the photo album shut and put it away. No, she firmly told herself. She wouldn't allow herself to fall backward into the dark abyss of the past again. Life had drastically changed. She had changed. Now, she successfully owned her very own architectural design firm, Marques Design Studio. She had intentionally, legally kept the Marques name after the split because it was the name proudly listed on all her hard-earned degrees, certifications, and legal papers from before the bitter divorce. Her business was still relatively small, but it was steadily, beautifully growing on its own merits, entirely without Marques's financial input or his constant, belittling criticism. And then, of course, there was Lucien. He had unexpectedly come into her chaotic life like a clean, reviving breath of fresh mountain air. She thought about his kind, intelligent dark eyes and his deep, soothingly calm voice. They had initially met at a high-end charity gala several months ago. Lynn had practically dragged her there in an effort to get her out of her sweatpants and out of the house. Lucien was quietly introduced to her by a mutual friend as a generous, anonymous donor to the arts. He didn't wear flashy designer logos or show off his immense wealth. Even though she later found out he privately gave staggering amounts of millions to incredibly good causes around the globe. They had clicked right away over a glass of champagne. Both of them deeply, passionately loved modern art, sustainable design, and international travel. She had eventually heard little, whispered things from others about the true extent of his money, something about a massive, generational family inheritance, and a controlling stake in a massive global tech conglomerate. Lucien owned a massive part of a highly successful billion-dollar tech company, but he never, ever talked much about his money to her. When he had first politely asked Elina out for dinner, she had severely panicked. She wasn't at all sure if her bruised heart was ready to trust a powerful man again. But something innate and profound about Lucien made her feel completely, wonderfully safe. She found that she trusted his gentle spirit from the very beginning. Since that first date, they had slowly, intentionally built something incredibly strong together. It was quiet, private, but deeply, undeniably real. Her phone buzzed again, vibrating against the floorboards and pulling her out of her deep thoughts. It was a sweet text message from Lucien. "Dinner tonight? Or I can stop by your design studio later, and we can just grab casual drinks after you finish up your drafts." Elina smiled brightly at the glowing screen. A profound, spreading warmth filled her entire chest. She happily texted back, "Dinner sounds absolutely perfect. I'll be stuck at the studio for a few more hours finishing a rendering. But I should be totally free by 6. See you then." She gently closed the heavy photo album, placed it carefully back in its cardboard storage box, and then slid it deep into the darkest, furthest corner of her bedroom closet. It felt incredibly therapeutic, like a physical, final, small goodbye to the painful memories and to the lingering trauma of her 20s. Yes, Marques and Celeste's big, extravagant engagement party would probably be the relentless, gossipy talk of the city for weeks to come. But Elina had her own vibrant, successful life now. She had her own beautiful story to live. Still a nagging, persistent instinct deep inside her gut whispered that this situation wasn't entirely over. Her dark past with Marques might soon return, and it might be infinitely louder and more destructive than before. That night, the delicate brass bell above the heavy glass door of a lovely, authentic French restaurant rang musically as Lucien pulled it open, holding it for Elina. His large, warm hand rested gently and protectively on the small of her back as they walked in out of the chilly evening air. The restaurant, famously called Maison Lawn, was incredibly quiet, exclusive, and breathtakingly beautiful. Soft, sultry jazz music played seamlessly in the background. The ambient lighting cascading from the crystal chandeliers was warm, flattering, and golden. The impeccably dressed hosts at the front desk knew Lucien right away. With respectful nods, they immediately bypassed the crowded main dining room and led them to a secluded, highly private table tucked away in the back corner. Elina sat down, pulling off her coat, admiring the incredibly elegant table setting. The heavy, polished silverware gleamed under the candlelight. The crisp white linen napkins were perfectly folded. Everything was absolutely, flawlessly perfect. She noticed out of the corner of her eye that a few wealthy patrons at nearby tables were looking curiously at Lucien. They didn't seem entirely sure of exactly who he was, but they could clearly tell from his tailored clothes and his posture that he was someone incredibly important and powerful. She had slowly gotten used to this underlying dynamic. Lucien never, ever bragged or demanded special treatment, but he possessed a quiet, commanding presence that naturally made people look twice and defer to him. "I took the liberty of ordering your absolute favorite vintage red wine," Lucien said with a devastatingly handsome smile, settling into his chair. "I thought we really needed to properly celebrate your incredible good news." Elina smiled wide, her eyes sparkling with joy. Earlier that very morning, after weeks of grueling presentations, she had officially signed a massive, lucrative design deal with an emerging, luxury boutique hotel chain. The executives had seen her innovative portfolio work online and aggressively recruited her to exclusively design the interior of their flagship Next location in Manhattan. It was a massive commission that could single-handedly take her small design studio to the absolute next level of industry success. "That's really, really sweet of you, Lucien," she said, blushing slightly. "I honestly still can't believe they actually chose me over all the bigger corporate firms." Lucien reached gently across the small, candlelit table and took Elina's hands in his. "You entirely deserve this incredible success. I am so unbelievably proud of you," he said. His deep voice was calm, steady, and full of absolute, unshakable belief. He spoke to her like he saw a brilliant, blazing fire in her that she was still only just learning to see in herself. The sophisticated wine waiter glided over to their table and expertly poured their expensive drinks. They lifted their crystal glasses and clinked them gently together. The soft, melodic sound of fine crystal touching glass filled the quiet, intimate space between them. Outside the restaurant, the evening rain had returned, moving slowly down the large pane-glass windows like slow, shimmering silver lines. The busy, chaotic world outside completely faded away into nothingness, and it truly felt like it was just the two of them alone in the entire sprawling city. Elina took a slow sip. The complex, velvety red wine instantly warmed her throat and settled the lingering chill in her chest. Their dinner conversation flowed incredibly easily, bouncing from topic to topic. Lucien talked briefly about an upcoming business trip to London he had scheduled for a major international charity event. As usual, he didn't talk much about the specific, billion-dollar logistics of his tech company or his immense generational wealth. He strongly preferred to keep that chaotic side of his life fiercely private when he was with her. Elina sometimes quietly wondered what heavy burdens he didn't say out loud, not because she thought he was maliciously hiding dark secrets from her, but maybe because he had learned the hard way how to protect his own peace by keeping the ruthless corporate world separate from his heart. She, on the other hand, lit up like a Roman candle as she talked passionately about her new boutique hotel design project. Her creative mind was absolutely overflowing with grand ideas. She told him all about her preliminary architectural sketches, her ambitious color mood boards, and her vision for the lobby with a level of pure, unadulterated excitement she hadn't felt about her career in years. And Lucien listened. He really, truly listened, asking insightful questions and encouraging her vision. Halfway through the decadent dinner, while enjoying a perfectly seared duck confit, Lucien put down his silver fork. He looked down thoughtfully at his plate for a long moment before speaking. "I've been thinking a lot lately," he said slowly, choosing his words with deliberate care, "about formally introducing you to some of my closest friends and key business contacts. I really want them to finally know exactly who I'm with. I want them to meet the amazing, brilliant woman you are." His voice was incredibly soft, but Elina could feel the immense weight of his words. She knew instinctively that this meant a great deal to him. She paused, her own fork suspended in midair. Her heart skipped a frantic beat against her ribs. "You do?" she asked, genuinely surprised, but deeply, profoundly touched. It wasn't just about attending a fancy social event together. It was about what the invitation fundamentally meant. Lucien was officially, purposefully opening the locked door to his highly guarded, private inner world. It was a massive, terrifyingly big step for him to take. They had only been exclusively dating for a couple of months, and his world was entirely full of wildly powerful, intimidating, ultra-wealthy people. People who might snobbishly look down on her and see her as just a struggling architect from a broken marriage. Would she feel entirely out of place? Would she feel like she didn't belong in those ballrooms? Would his elite friends try to make her feel small? Lucien nodded solemnly and set his linen napkin gently on the table, giving her his full attention. "There's a very important foundation fundraiser gala next week. I would absolutely love for you to come and stand by my side as my partner. If that's okay with you, of course." He looked deeply into her eyes. His gaze was incredibly kind but fiercely serious, silently telling her without words that she absolutely did not need to doubt herself for a single second. Elina felt a wild, swirling mix of intense emotions, thrilling excitement, stomach-churning nerves, and just a little bit of residual, trauma-induced fear from her past experiences with high society snobs. "Of course," she said softly, a genuine smile breaking across her face. "I would absolutely love to go with you. Lucien. Lucien smiled with profound, real joy that lit up his entire face. He reached out across the table and gently rubbed the back of her hand with his warm thumb. Thank you. I am so incredibly happy that you are in my life, Elina. She smiled warmly back at him, but deep down inside her chest, she felt her scarred heart ache in a profoundly good, beautiful way. It felt exactly like something that had been violently broken inside her for years was finally, slowly, miraculously healing. They happily stayed for dessert, sharing a decadent, warm chocolate lava cake that literally melted in her mouth. They spent the next hour talking about fun, light-hearted things, their favorite classic books, funny, embarrassing childhood memories, and beautiful, exotic places around the world they both dreamed of visiting together one day. Elina felt utterly, blissfully peaceful for once in her chaotic adult life. She wasn't terrified of the unknown future anymore. For the first time, she actively wanted it to arrive. Marques's toxic name never once came up in conversation. He simply didn't belong in the sacred space of this beautiful night. This evening was entirely about Lucien, about fierce hope, and about building something entirely new. Later, as midnight approached, the restaurant grew very quiet as the last few patrons departed. It was finally time to go. I'll take you home safely, Lucien said, helping her into her coat and leading her out the door to a shiny, luxurious black town car that was idling, waiting patiently for them outside in the rain. She vividly remembered the very first time he'd picked her up for a date with a private, uniformed driver. She had been so intimidated that she had desperately wanted to just take a yellow cab instead. Fancy, chauffeured cars and billionaires felt like entirely too much pressure for a girl who was used to splitting subway fares. But now, after months together, she was surprisingly used to this elevated aspect of life with him. And even though she stubbornly, fiercely liked to pay her own way whenever she could to maintain her independence, she no longer felt like she didn't fit into his orbit. Elina was slowly but surely getting much more comfortable with navigating Lucien's world. Still, she liked to pull out her own credit card for coffees and lunches when she could. Inside the quiet, spacious, leather-scented car, Lucien put his strong arm gently and protectively around her shoulders. Elina leaned heavily into his side, feeling incredibly calm, warm, and secure. She closed her tired eyes and peacefully watched the soft, neon glow of the passing city lights blur through the rain-streaked, tinted window as they drove smoothly through the busy streets of New York. The quiet, powerful purr of the car's engine helped her completely relax her muscles. In that beautifully peaceful, quiet moment in the dark, she finally let herself fully believe something entirely new and terrifyingly wonderful. Maybe, just maybe, her fractured life was finally, permanently moving forward. Maybe she was really, truly free from the suffocating heartbreak and destruction that Marques had callously left behind in his wake. The very next morning, brilliant, inspiring sunlight poured generously through the massive industrial windows into Elina's busy architecture studio. She sat perched at her large wooden drafting desk, focused intensely, drawing smooth, precise pencil lines for the lobby design of her massive new hotel project. She was deeply in the zone, entirely focused on her art, until the shrill ringing of the office phone broke her concentration. Elina Marques. Marques Design Studio, she answered professionally, placing her graphite pencil down on the desk. Elina. It's me, came Lynn's incredibly loud, highly excited voice through the receiver. You are literally not going to believe this. Elina sat up straighter in her ergonomic chair, her brow furrowing. What happened? What is it? I just heard from a very reliable source over at the Chronicle, Lynn said breathlessly. Marques and his new prize, Celeste, are officially having their massive, over-the-top engagement party next week. They rented out the grand ballroom at the Four Seasons. And guess what else? They are apparently inviting absolutely everyone from your old married social group. Mutual friends, your old business clients, literally everyone. Elina felt her stomach violently twist into an uncomfortable knot. "Why on earth would they go out of their way to invite me and my clients?" she asked, bewildered. "Well, apparently Marques absolutely didn't want you anywhere near there," Lynn gossiped happily. But Celeste aggressively pushed for it. She explicitly told the Society paper reporter that she desperately wants a peaceful, blended future or some garbage like that. But honestly, if you ask me, maybe she just really wants to show off her new ring and rub her rich family in your face. Lynn's loud voice softened considerably with genuine concern. "I know you probably don't care about him anymore, Al, but I really wanted you to know immediately, just in case a ridiculous, fancy invite actually shows up in your mail." Elina let out a long, slow, frustrated breath, pinching the bridge of her nose. She wasn't entirely surprised. Marques absolutely loved being the center of media attention. Of course, his second engagement would be some huge, performative, flashy public event to stroke his massive ego. "Thanks for telling me, Lynn," she said, leaning back in her chair. "If I actually get invited to that circus, I'll think long and hard about what to do with it." "Just remember," Lynn added fiercely, acting as her protective shield, "you do not owe either of those toxic people anything. Not an RSVP, and certainly not your presence." Elina smiled a little, deeply grateful for her friend's fierce loyalty. "I know. Thank you. So, anyway, how's the gorgeous Lucien?" Lynn asked, seamlessly pivoting to much better news. Just hearing his name said out loud made Elina smile much wider. "He's really good. Actually, we had a great dinner last night. He wants to officially introduce me to his inner circle at a massive charity fundraiser gala next week." Lynn laughed with pure delight. "Ooh, big, glamorous, high society week ahead for you. Better you than me, dealing with all those rich snobs. But seriously, honey, I am so incredibly happy for you. You deserve a good man. And listen, if you somehow decide you need a +1 to crash Marques's pathetic circus, I am totally free. I'll even wear dark sunglasses and earpiece and act like your personal, intimidating bodyguard." They laughed loudly together and eventually ended the call. Elina sat quietly for a long moment with the phone still grasped tightly in her hand, staring blankly at her drafting table. She was thinking deeply about how Marques's upcoming party would undoubtedly be completely full of highly important, judgmental people. It would be incredibly flashy, loud, and obnoxious. It would be heavily designed to show off his newfound access to massive money and political power. Celeste, Elina remembered now, piecing the rumors together. She came from a very old, incredibly rich, well-connected Boston political family. People in the city said she was a brilliant, razor-sharp corporate lawyer. Marques probably looked at her and saw the absolute perfect, strategic mix for his life: love, wealth, and immense political power. It was exactly the kind of calculating, ladder-climbing move he had always desperately wanted to make when they were struggling together. Later that same afternoon, as if summoned by the universe's twisted sense of humor, a uniformed delivery person came directly to the glass doors of Elina's apartment building. He handed her a large, incredibly thick, heavy cream-colored envelope adorned with swirling, shiny gold calligraphy. Her heartbeat instantly ticked faster. Even though she was holding a warm, comforting cup of herbal tea in her other hand, a cold, unmistakable chill ran rapidly through her entire body. The expensive envelope felt incredibly heavy in her hands. Like it carried far more than just cardstock paper, it carried the weight of her traumatic past. The ornate, embossed return address on the back flap read elegantly: Mr. Marques Varela and Miss Celeste Raymond. Elina sighed deeply, walking back into her kitchen. So, the ridiculous rumors were absolutely true. They had actually invited the ex-wife. She carefully sliced the envelope open. Inside was a thick, shiny, excessively extravagant invitation card. It detailed their incredibly fancy, black-tie engagement party to be held in the grand ballroom at the Four Seasons Hotel. Elina looked at the gleaming gold foil for a long moment, feeling a sickening wave of revulsion, then shoved it back into the envelope. She genuinely didn't know if she should immediately throw it into the trash can or hide it deep in a junk drawer where she wouldn't have to look at it. It felt far too loud and flashy to simply ignore, yet it felt far too rude and cowardly to just pretend it had gotten lost in the mail. A highly cynical part of her strongly suspected that this invitation was entirely Celeste's calculated idea. Not to be gracious or kind, but to maliciously show off her victory. Maybe the hidden subtext of the gold lettering was simply a taunt. Come see exactly what you lost out on. Later that cold night, Elina sat curled up on her plush velvet couch with a thick, knitted blanket draped over her legs. She stared blankly at the gold-rimmed invitation sitting innocently on the glass coffee table. She decided she definitely needed to talk to Lucien about it and get his level-headed perspective. Maybe they wouldn't go at all. Maybe they would just go to a movie instead. Still, the heavy envelope sat there under the lamplight like a physical, mocking challenge. Like it was aggressively waiting for her to make a move and prove her courage. She absolutely didn't want to see Marques walk proudly around that glittering ballroom with Celeste on his arm, acting like the king of the world. She didn't want to subject herself to feeling like she didn't belong in that wealthy crowd, or deal with the pitying stares of their old mutual friends. But a small, defiant, powerful voice deep inside her soul suddenly whispered, "What if I actually went? What if I bravely walked into that room and showed him, and everyone else, that I am absolutely not a broken woman anymore? What if I showed them that I am infinitely stronger now without him?" Elina picked up her phone and boldly called Lucien. He answered on the very first ring. "Elina," he said warmly, his deep voice immediately soothing her frayed nerves. "I was actually just thinking of you." "Well," she said with a dry, cynical smile, "something very interesting just showed up by courier at my door." "Oh." An official, gold-plated invitation to Marques's grand engagement party. Lucien paused on the other end of the line, taking a moment to process the audacity of the gesture. "How do you feel about receiving that?" Elina hugged her throw pillow tightly to her chest. "I'm honestly not sure. Lucien, part of me wants to stay as far away from that toxic mess as possible. But another part of me, maybe I desperately want to go just to prove something to myself." Her voice shook just a little bit, betraying her lingering anxiety. It wasn't even Marques who sent it. It was explicitly sent by Celeste. It heavily feels like a mean-spirited trick. But maybe I'm just being paranoid and carrying too much baggage. Lucien's voice came through the speaker, incredibly calm, grounding, and strong. "Elina, listen to me. Whatever you choose to do, I will be right there with you. If you want to go and face him, I will put on my best tuxedo and stand proudly right next to you. If you decide not to go, we will throw the invitation away and spend the night doing something infinitely better. Just us. It is entirely your choice." His supportive, unshakable words were incredibly soft, but they gave her an immense surge of internal strength. It felt exactly like he was wrapping her in a suit of protective armor she didn't even know she desperately needed. Elina took a deep, shuddering breath. Her chest instantly felt 1,000,000 times lighter. "I'll think about it," she said softly, a genuine smile returning to her face. "But right now, we have your important charity fundraiser next week. That is exactly where I want to put all my focus and energy." Elina hung up the phone, completely unaware that the next few days would quickly bring a massive, uncontrollable storm. Lucien, Marques, and Celeste, three very different, strong-willed people originating from three entirely different worlds, were about to violently collide. And when the dust finally settled, absolutely nothing in their lives would ever be the same again. The next week arrived incredibly fast. It was a chaotic blur, full of raw nerves, dress fittings, and big, overwhelming feelings. Elina stood silently in front of the massive, floor-to-ceiling mirror in the master bedroom of Lucien's sprawling penthouse. The breathtaking view out the window looked directly over the glowing expanse of New York City. Millions of tiny, brilliant lights sparkled like a sea of diamonds across the sprawling, endless skyline. Looking out at it, it truly felt like absolutely anything in the world could happen tonight. Elina wore a breathtaking, floor-length emerald green silk gown. It was expertly tailored and fit her curves perfectly, making her look incredibly regal and sophisticated. Earlier that day, her friend Lynn had come over to the apartment specifically to help do her hair and makeup, pouring them both mimosas to calm the nerves. They had carefully picked a soft, romantic, sweeping updo style that gently framed Elina's face with loose curls. Now, as Elina stood alone and looked deeply into her own eyes in the mirror, she saw something entirely new looking back at her. Quiet, fierce, undeniable confidence. She wasn't entirely sure if she truly, 100% felt that unshakable strength deep inside her core yet, but she undeniably looked like a woman who owned the world. Lucien stepped quietly into the room and stood right beside her, expertly fixing the heavy platinum cufflinks on his crisp white shirt. He leaned down and pressed a warm, lingering kiss to her temple. "You look absolutely amazing, Elina," he said softly, his dark eyes meeting hers in the mirror's reflection. "Are you ready for this?" Elina took a deep breath, smoothing the silk of her dress, and gave a small, brave smile. "As ready as I'll ever be. I still don't really know who exactly we'll see tonight." Lucien paused, turning to face her, adjusting his black bow tie. "It's going to be a very eclectic mix," he explained calmly. "There will be some very rich philanthropic donors, several aggressive corporate investors, and probably even a few local celebrities. These high society events can honestly feel like a lot to handle if you aren't used to the noise. If you ever feel overwhelmed, or if you just want to leave at any time, just say the word and we will walk out the door." A sleek black town car drove them smoothly to the event. They arrived at the grand entrance of the historic Laurelwood Hotel. A long line of incredibly fancy, expensive luxury cars was already lined up outside the valet stand. Bright, blinding lights flashed rapidly from aggressive paparazzi cameras stationed behind velvet ropes. People dressed in shiny, expensive designer dresses and custom tuxedos walked confidently inside, flashing quiet, practiced smiles that screamed of loud, generational money. Elina stayed very close to Lucien, linking her arm tightly through his as they navigated the flashing cameras. Her racing heart finally slowed down a little bit once they were safely inside the heavily guarded venue. The main ballroom was incredibly big, vaulted, and breathtakingly beautiful. Massive, glittering crystal chandeliers sparkled blindingly above them, casting a warm, golden glow over the crowd. Impeccably dressed waiters walked silently by with silver trays completely loaded with flutes of expensive vintage champagne. Suddenly, a tall, imposing older woman with perfectly styled, bright red hair came rushing up to them, smiling so brightly it looked almost painful. "Lucien, darling," she exclaimed loudly, grabbing his shoulders and kissing both of his cheeks in the traditional socialite greeting. "It is so incredibly good to see you. And who is this absolutely lovely woman you've brought with you?" Lucien smiled politely and placed a warm, supportive hand firmly on the small of Elina's back. "Monica, this is Elina Marques, my girlfriend. Elina, I'd like you to meet Monica Herrera. She is the chairwoman on the board of directors for the Global Arts Foundation." Monica's heavily made-up eyes widened, and she smiled even wider, showing perfectly white teeth. "So very nice to meet you, my dear." Then she turned to Lucien, completely delighted. "Lucien told me you are a brilliant architect. How thrilling and exciting. We absolutely have to sit down and talk about our new, multi-million-dollar cultural center project currently being developed in Berkeley. We need fresh eyes on it." Elina nodded politely, shaking the woman's heavily ringed hand. "I'd love to discuss it with you." Monica's intense, booming energy was a little bit much to handle right out of the gate, but Elina smiled graciously and kept up with the rapid-fire conversation. Throughout the cocktail hour, more and more important, wealthy people came over to their circle. They smiled politely, asked a few superficial, probing questions about Elina's background, and then rapidly started talking loudly about massive global business mergers or multi-million-dollar charity plans. Elina stood quietly, listened intently, and tried her absolute best to engage. But it was abundantly, terrifyingly clear that these specific people lived in a completely different stratosphere, a hidden, exclusive world of incredibly big names, massive offshore money, and huge political promises. Later in the evening, feeling slightly suffocated by the heavy perfume and the relentless networking, Elina politely excused herself and stepped away for a brief, much-needed mental break. She wandered away from the loud bar and found a quiet, softly lit corner of the ballroom that was dedicated to displaying photos and stories highlighting the Foundation's global charitable work. There were beautiful, moving displays detailing new hospitals built in rural areas, massive art scholarships awarded to underprivileged youth, and innovative green energy projects currently operating around the world. She was deeply engrossed, quietly reading a brass plaque about a successful wildlife conservation project in South Africa, when a loud, grating voice right behind her made her physically jump. "Elina Marques? Is that really you?" The voice was definitely a man's, and it sounded horribly, uncomfortably familiar. She turned around slowly, and the blood instantly froze in her veins. It was David Russell. He was an old, sleazy, incredibly obnoxious friend of Marques. Someone her ex-husband used to frequently drink with and talk shady real estate business with late into the night. David's beady eyes lit up with malicious glee as he looked her up and down. "I almost didn't believe it was you." "Look at you," he said loudly. "How have you been?" Elina forced a very tight, incredibly polite smile, crossing her arms defensively. "I'm doing very well, David. I certainly didn't expect to run into you at an event like this." Her voice was perfectly calm and measured, but her chest felt incredibly, painfully tight. It always did when the toxic remnants of her past came wandering a little too close for comfort. "Oh, I'm a corporate sponsor for the gala," David bragged proudly, gently and pretentiously spinning the expensive red wine in his crystal glass. "Donating to charity is always good for public relations and business, right?" He smiled a wide, greasy smile, but the warmth definitely didn't reach his cold, calculating eyes. It was exactly the kind of fake, rehearsed smile that loudly declared to the world, "I'm only here to look good for the cameras, not to actually care about anyone." "Actually," he added, taking a step closer and lowering his voice conspiratorially, "my VIP table is located right next to Marcus Varela's table at the big engagement party next week. Are you planning to go?" Elina's spine instantly straightened like a steel rod. Her breath caught sharply in her throat. Even now, after all the healing she had done, the mere mention of Marcus's name still came heavily loaded with painful, electric static. "I'm still thinking about it," she said carefully, desperately trying to keep her voice light and unbothered, giving him absolutely no ammunition to use against her. David let out a low, incredibly condescending chuckle. "You really should go, Elina. Marcus hasn't stopped aggressively bragging to anyone who will listen about his gorgeous new fiancée. Something about her wealthy father being heavily connected to politicians in D.C. He's really doing incredibly well for himself these days. Might be fun for you to show up and see exactly what you missed out on." Elina felt a massive, hot wave of intense irritation wash over her. And right underneath that irritation, something much sharper and darker, pure disgust. It was sickening that Marcus still fundamentally treated love and marriage exactly like a strategic business plan for a corporate merger. "Trust me, David," she said coolly, her eyes narrowing slightly as she stared him down. "I didn't miss out on a single thing. And for the record, I'm here tonight with someone else." She nervously glanced around the crowded room, desperately hoping Lucien would magically show up and rescue her from this awful conversation. She was an independent woman, and she didn't want to ever seem like a damsel in distress who needed constant help. But right now, in this specific moment, she would highly welcome the interruption. David noticed her eyes darting away and smirked, taking the hint. All right. I'll leave you to your networking. Take care of yourself, Elina." He winked at her, a deeply sleazy, infuriating gesture, and walked off into the crowd, his wine glass still in hand. He left behind a very sour, metallic feeling in the air, and a stark, unpleasant reminder of a past Elina had absolutely no use for anymore. Elina let out a long, slow, shaky breath and leaned heavily against the wooden photo display behind her. Hanging directly behind her head was a dark, abstract painting of a fractured, broken city. It felt entirely too close to how her mind felt in that moment. Then she felt a large, incredibly warm hand rest gently on her bare shoulder. She spun around. Lucien stood there, his dark eyes completely full of deep, genuine concern. A massive wave of immense comfort and safety instantly filled her entire body. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice low and protective. Elina nodded quickly, trying to force a bright smile to hide her anxiety. "Yeah, it was just someone from my old life with Marques. Can we please get some fresh air?" "Of course," Lucien said immediately. He took her hand and expertly led her through the dense crowd to a set of large glass doors opening onto a massive stone terrace. They stepped out into the cool, quiet night. The glittering city lights sparkled beautifully miles below them. The night air felt instantly cooler, cleaner, and much easier to breathe. The chaotic lights, the loud jazz music, and the overwhelming, buzzing voices from inside the ballroom immediately faded into background noise as Elina stood near the stone railing. She closed her eyes for a long second, breathing in the peace of the night. Lucien stood very close behind her, his presence a solid, comforting wall against the wind. "Elina," he said gently, his voice barely above a whisper, "I know that unexpectedly seeing toxic people from your past can be incredibly hard and triggering. But I want you to know, with absolute certainty, that I am here with you. I am here for you." She turned around to face him, her heart suddenly incredibly full of emotion. It wasn't just seeing David that had rattled her. It was absolutely everything. The heavy weight of the past desperately trying to pull her backward, while the bright promise of the future was constantly calling her forward. "Thank you, Lucien," she whispered, her voice cracking slightly. "I'm okay, really, but it is still very hard sometimes. The engagement party is coming up so soon, and I guess I'm still internally healing from the terrible way Marques used to constantly tear me down and make me feel utterly worthless." Her voice cracked a little more on the final word, but it was raw, vulnerable, and completely real. Lucien reached out with infinite tenderness and gently brushed a stray strand of dark hair away from her face. "You are absolutely not that broken woman anymore," he said, his eyes fierce with conviction. "You are incredibly strong. But listen to me. If going to that obnoxious party is what it takes to finally help you get closure and move on with your life, I will gladly go with you. We will face him together." Elina looked up into his eyes and felt something incredibly warm and powerful spark to life inside her chest. It was a potent, beautiful mixture of deep gratitude and newfound, unshakable strength. "I appreciate that more than you know," she said softly, leaning into his chest, letting his arms wrap securely around her. Standing high above the restless city, with the millions of lights shining below them like a galaxy of stars, Elina felt something massive and deep shift permanently inside her soul. Marques's upcoming party wouldn't just be another awkward social event to endure. Something incredibly big was coming on the horizon, and it had the power to change absolutely everything. Everything Elina previously thought she knew about her traumatic past, and everything she hoped for her bright future, was about to violently, spectacularly change. A week later, the grand, imposing entrance of the Four Seasons Hotel sparkled brilliantly with hundreds of twinkling lights and screaming elegance as Elina walked through the heavy glass doors, holding tightly onto Lucien's hand. After thinking long and hard about it for days, and having several deep conversations with Lynn, she had finally made her brave choice. She was going to attend Marcus's grand engagement party. It felt exactly like reading the very last painful page in a terrible book that she desperately needed to slam closed forever. Lucien wore a breathtaking, custom-tailored black tuxedo that fit his broad shoulders perfectly. He looked incredibly calm, quietly strong, and completely, unshakably by her side. Elina wore a stunning, deep sapphire blue silk gown that draped flawlessly over her curves, making her feel incredibly bold, powerful, and undeniably beautiful. For the very first time in years of attending these types of functions, she finally felt like she truly, actually belonged in the room. A long, plush red carpet was stretched out elegantly outside the hotel entrance. Paparazzi cameras flashed blindingly into the night. Wealthy, elite guests smiled practiced, fake smiles as they stepped out of their limousines and into the grand lobby of the hotel. Famous political names, old money heirs, and powerful corporate people swarmed the entrance. Inside the venue, absolutely everything was designed to be excessively grand and intimidating. Massive, towering floral arrangements of white roses and orchids filled the entryway, scenting the air heavily. Soft, romantic classical music from a live string group played elegantly in the background. Waiters in crisp white uniforms walked briskly by with silver trays loaded with expensive vintage champagne and tiny gourmet snacks. Then, cutting through the crowd, Marcus appeared. He looked incredibly sharp and aggressive in a perfectly tailored designer suit. His dark eyes widened in sheer, unadulterated shock for a fraction of a moment when he saw Elina walk in, looking radiant, with Lucien confidently holding her arm. Standing right next to him was Celeste Raymond, practically glowing in a heavily sequined, expensive silver dress. Her vibrant red hair was pinned up in a neat, incredibly stylish and complex twist. She smiled brightly when she saw Elina and immediately walked over, pulling Marcus with her. "Elina," Celeste said warmly, reaching out her manicured hand. "I am so incredibly glad you could actually come tonight. Marcus mentioned that he saw you in the city recently." Elina politely shook her hand, immediately noticing the gigantic, blinding diamond sparkling aggressively on Celeste's ring finger. "Thank you so much for the kind invitation, Celeste," Elina said, maintaining a perfectly calm, incredibly careful, polite smile that gave absolutely nothing away. Marcus cleared his throat loudly, visibly uncomfortable with the interaction. "Lucien," he said with a quick, stiff nod of his head, trying to assert dominance. "Good to see you again." Lucien answered smoothly, his deep voice effortlessly commanding the space. "You too, Marcus, and congratulations on the engagement." There was a very short, incredibly awkward, heavy silence that fell over the four of them. Then, Celeste gently but firmly touched Marcus's arm, sensing the tension, and politely announced that they had to go to the front of the room to officially greet more arriving VIP guests. Elina let out a quiet, shaky breath as they walked away and looked up at Lucien with a small, incredibly grateful smile. "Well, I suppose that wasn't so terribly bad," she whispered, even though her heart was still beating a frantic rhythm against her ribs. They walked further into the massive, glittering ballroom and tried some of the fancy, bite-sized food circulating on trays. Elina casually said hello to a few familiar faces from her past life. Lynn was there, too, looking gorgeous in a red dress with her boyfriend, and she enthusiastically waved them over to a quiet corner near the bar. They chatted happily, and Lynn, true to form, made a few very funny, sarcastic, whispered comments about how ridiculously dramatic and tacky Marcus's party decor looked. It made Elina laugh a real, genuine laugh, but underneath the joy, there was still a very palpable, heavy tension humming in the air of the room. From a safe distance, Elina quietly watched Marcus and Celeste mingle and talk with the wealthy guests. Celeste looked absolutely perfect. She was calm, incredibly smart, and totally in control of her image. Marcus looked immensely proud, perhaps even a little too aggressively proud, as he paraded her around and introduced her to important, politically connected people. The entire party was completely full of fancy, fake smiles and quiet, calculating corporate networking games. Elina watched it all unfold, her head spinning just a little bit from the sheer fakeness of it. Everything in the room felt exactly like a highly orchestrated theatrical show. Then, the string music abruptly stopped. The loud, buzzing room slowly went quiet. Marques walked confidently to a microphone set up on a small stage and tapped it twice, the sound echoing through the hall. "Good evening, absolutely everyone," he said, smiling his most charming, practiced smile. "Celeste and I want to deeply thank you all for coming out tonight to celebrate our engagement. We are so incredibly happy to share this beautiful milestone with all of you." His voice was incredibly smooth, modulated, and almost too perfectly rehearsed. The wealthy crowd clapped politely. Celeste gracefully took the microphone next, smiling warmly at the audience. "I am so incredibly lucky to have a man like Marques in my life," she said, her voice carrying over the speakers. "We are so excited for our bright future together, and we are deeply thankful for all of your love and support tonight." She spoke very well, hitting all the right PR notes, but Elina, who knew the signs of anxiety, noticed exactly how tightly Celeste gripped the metal microphone stand, her knuckles turning white. Her picture-perfect smile was held just a fraction of a second too long to be genuine. Something was definitely off behind the scenes. The jazz band started playing a lively tune again. People clapped, and the loud chatter resumed. Waiters rushed out of the kitchen, bringing out more trays of champagne. Lucien turned his body toward Elina and gave her a warm, incredibly proud smile. "You have been absolutely amazing tonight," he whispered softly into her ear. His deep voice felt exactly like a warm, impenetrable shield wrapping completely around her. Elina let out a long, slow breath she didn't even know she had been holding for the last hour. "I think I'm finally ready to leave now," she said quietly, leaning into him. "This was more than enough closure for me." Just as they began to turn toward the coat check to leave the ballroom, a sharp, grating, highly familiar voice stopped them dead in their tracks. "Leaving so early? You haven't even properly said congratulations to the couple's family." It was Patricia Varela, Marques's deeply bitter, judgmental mother. She was draped in heavy, expensive pearls and wore a tight, malicious smile. Once upon a time, years ago, she had claimed to love Elina like a daughter. But immediately after the messy divorce, she had made it brutally, publicly clear that Elina was no longer welcome in their social circles, blaming her entirely for the failure of the marriage. "Hello, Patricia," Elina said, standing incredibly tall and squaring her shoulders. She didn't flinch or look away for a single second. Patricia's cold, critical eyes moved instantly to Lucien. She looked him up and down slowly, appraising his custom tuxedo, looking at him exactly like he was a math problem she had to figure out. "And exactly who is this?" she asked rudely, her tone dripping with condescension. Before Elina could even open her mouth to defend him, Lucien spoke up, his voice incredibly kind, calm, and utterly unbothered. "I'm Lucien Armand, ma'am. I have the pleasure of being here tonight with Elina." Patricia's heavily lined eyes narrowed suspiciously. Her hand twitched slightly around her champagne glass. She seemed to vaguely recognize the powerful name, but her arrogant brain couldn't quite place it, so she said nothing respectful. "You seem oddly familiar," she said, her tone skeptical. "Have we met somewhere before?" Lucien stayed perfectly, terrifyingly calm. "Maybe we crossed paths at a charity event in the city," he said. His voice was completely even and polite. But Elina, standing right beside him, saw the subtle shift in his posture. He was watching the older woman incredibly closely now, his guard fully up, just in case she tried to attack Elina. "That must be it then," Patricia said dismissively. Though she still looked highly curious and unsatisfied, she turned her venomous attention back to Elina. "I suppose it's a good thing you've finally moved on with your life. Elina, though some people in our family still wonder, did you ever truly understand or appreciate exactly what Marques generously gave you?" Lucien didn't say a single word. His strong jaw tightened visibly in anger at the insult, but he stayed perfectly still. He implicitly trusted Elina to speak for herself and fight her own battles. And she absolutely did. "With all due respect, Patricia," Elina said, her voice incredibly calm, clear, but radiating strong authority. "That is absolutely not your business anymore. I genuinely wish Marques and Celeste well." Her voice was smooth and polite, but right under the surface, there was an edge of forged steel that had never been there before. Patricia's thin lips pressed together into a furious white line. "Well, do enjoy the rest of the party," she spat, then turned sharply on her heel and walked off, leaving a heavy, toxic trail of tension behind her in the air. Elina stood perfectly still for a long moment. In the silence, she could almost hear the pathetic, frightened voice of her old self, the weak girl who used to try so incredibly, desperately hard to win Patricia's impossible love and approval. That desperate voice was completely, permanently gone. Lucien placed a gentle, supportive hand on her bare back. "Are you okay?" "I'm perfectly fine," Elina said softly, looking up at him with clear eyes. "Let's just get some fresh air for a minute." They stepped outside through the glass doors onto a small, private stone terrace. The glittering city lights of Manhattan sparkled endlessly below them. The night air felt significantly cooler and much cleaner out here. The chaotic, flashing lights, the loud music, and the overwhelming, soft voices from inside the ballroom completely faded away as Elina stood near the railing on the terrace. She finally took a deep, full breath of air, the very first real breath she felt like she had taken all night. The agonizing, tight feeling between her shoulder blades finally began to ease and melt away, at least until the next wave of drama came crashing in. "That awful woman always made me feel like I was never good enough," Elina said softly, looking out at the skyline. It was the very first time in her life she had ever said that ugly truth out loud to another person. Lucien stepped closer and gently rubbed her shoulder, his touch grounding her. "You are infinitely more than enough. Elina, I am so incredibly proud of you for standing tall in there and not backing down." His words were incredibly simple, but they went straight, like an arrow, to her healing heart. Her throat tightened with deep emotion. A cool, crisp wind played gently with her dark hair. She turned toward him, opening her mouth to thank him again, but suddenly loud, chaotic voices and yelling from inside the ballroom made them both stop dead in their tracks. They looked at each other in alarm, then quickly stepped back through the doors into the ballroom. The entire energy in the massive room had completely, violently changed. Something had cracked wide open. The polite facade was gone. At the front of the room, Marques stood once again at the microphone. Celeste stood rigidly beside him, but they absolutely no longer looked happy or deeply in love. They looked incredibly nervous, panicked, and totally off balance. "Please, everyone, stay calm and remain in your seats," Marques said loudly into the microphone. His voice was incredibly tight and strained, desperately trying to stay in control of the spiraling narrative. Wealthy people looked around in shock. The massive room quickly filled with confused, panicked whispers. Then, Elina saw a very large, imposing hotel security guard walking aggressively through the crowd, heading directly toward where she and Lucien were standing. He looked incredibly serious and intensely focused. Her heart began to pound a frantic rhythm against her ribs. The large guard stopped directly in front of Lucien, blocking their path to the exit. "Excuse me, Mr. Armand," the guard said, his voice loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "We need you to come with us to the security office immediately." Elina panicked and grabbed Lucien's arm tightly. "What's going on?" she asked the guard fearfully. The guard looked highly unsure of himself, shifting his weight. We got an anonymous tip from a VIP guest. Someone said this man might be here tonight under a false, fraudulent identity." Elina's stomach violently twisted into a sickening knot. All around them, elite guests were already stopping to watch the confrontation. Some cruel attendees even pulled out their cell phones to record the drama. A massive, humiliating social scandal was starting live, right in front of everyone. Marques eagerly took the microphone again, his voice booming over the speakers. Lucien Armand, hotel security needs to formally check your background and your credentials. We simply can't allow anyone in this private room who doesn't belong here and is lying about their wealth. His words were delivered in a calm, authoritative tone, but his dark eyes looked wildly manic, a sickening mix of desperate pride and deep, underlying fear of being overshadowed. Elina stared up at him in pure, unadulterated disgust. "You personally invited us," she said furiously, her voice an angry hiss under her breath. But it was far too late. The reputational damage was already done. The foul accusation hung in the air. Celeste stepped up to the microphone quickly, looking mortified. "Marques, please, this really isn't necessary," she said, begging him. But her voice was incredibly shaky over the speakers. She clearly knew this petty stunt was going way too far and ruining her perfect night. Lucien, completely unbothered by the stares of 100 millionaires, raised his hand slowly and calmly to the aggressive security guard. "It's perfectly all right," he said, his deep voice carrying without the need for a microphone. "I am more than happy to explain exactly who I am to anyone who asks." He looked out confidently at the massive crowd. Some guests looked deeply confused, while others looked gleefully entertained by the unfolding drama. "But," Lucien continued, his voice turning to cold, hard steel, "I would very much like to know exactly who made this ridiculous, anonymous phone call to security." A dead, heavy silence fell over the entire ballroom. You could hear a pin drop. People whispered frantically behind their hands. Elina looked up at Marques on the stage, but he suddenly looked incredibly unsure of himself, realizing he had lost control of the room. Then she glanced over and saw Patricia Varela standing in the crowd. The older woman's wrinkled face showed a look of immense, smug satisfaction. It looked exactly like this public humiliation of Elina's new partner was what she had viciously wanted all along. Then, a loud, booming voice from the far corner of the room spoke up, cutting through the silence. "I placed the call." Everyone in the ballroom turned their heads simultaneously. A tall, very well-dressed, imposing older man with silver hair stepped aggressively into the middle of the room. Elina immediately knew who he was from the society papers, Gerald Preston, Celeste's billionaire father. He looked straight at Lucien with a hard, ruthless, assessing stare. "I've heard several highly disturbing stories about you recently in the financial sector," Gerald said loudly, making sure everyone heard him. "They say you falsely pretend to be incredibly rich and generous to charities. But absolutely no one in my network knows where your supposed money really comes from, or if it even exists." He looked around arrogantly at the wealthy guests surrounding him, rallying them to his side. "We simply can't just let anyone infiltrate these highly exclusive circles." And just like that, what was supposed to be a celebratory party violently turned into a brutal public inquisition. An invitation had been weaponized into a vicious, calculated attack. Elina felt a roaring wave of hot, protective anger rise rapidly in her chest. "He's not just anyone," she yelled back at the billionaire. "He's—" Lucien gently, firmly squeezed her hand, cutting her off. It was a quiet, physical message: "Stay calm. I have this." He looked directly at Gerald Preston, entirely unfazed by the man's immense wealth or social standing, and spoke clearly and authoritatively. "Sir, you are absolutely right about one thing. I do not talk much about my personal money or my holdings," Lucien said, his voice echoing in the silent room. "But I absolutely, unequivocally do belong in this room. If you really want proof of my financial standing, we can easily step aside into a private office, and I will gladly show you whatever credentials you feel you need to see." The massive room went dead quiet. Marques looked incredibly unsure of what to do next on stage. Celeste looked utterly shocked, covering her mouth with her hand. deeply embarrassed by her father's classless, public outburst. The large security guard waited awkwardly, sweating, not moving a muscle. Lucien didn't wait for a response. He smoothly reached his hand into the inside pocket of his custom tuxedo jacket and pulled out a heavy, matte black business card. He handed it directly to the nervous security guard. "Call the private, dedicated number on the back of this card," Lucien said, his voice ringing with absolute, terrifying authority. "My executive office will immediately confirm exactly who I am to you. I am the principal founder and the lead majority investor in Archite Tech." The entire crowd of elites gasped loudly in unison. Archite Tech was a staggeringly huge, trillion-dollar name in the global tech industry. Absolutely everyone in that room intimately knew what that company was worth. The shocking news spread incredibly fast through the whispering room like a wildfire. Gerald Preston aggressively snatched the black card from the guard's hand and read the gold foil print. His arrogant, flushed face instantly went a sickly, pale white. He realized in a fraction of a second that he had just publicly, aggressively insulted a man who was exponentially wealthier and vastly more powerful than he was. On the stage, Marcus's eyes changed rapidly. The smug arrogance melted away entirely, replaced by a sickening, crushing look of absolute confusion, humiliation, and deep, agonizing jealousy. The security guard spoke quietly and frantically into his earpiece. After a tense few seconds, he nodded vigorously, his eyes wide with fear. It is completely confirmed, sir." The guard practically bowed to Lucien. "I am so very, very sorry, Mr. Armand." He stepped back quickly, no longer blocking Lucien or Elina's path to the door. A heavy silence fell over the room once again. But this time, it was not a silence of anticipation. It was full of thick, suffocating tension and extreme embarrassment for the hosts. Lucien didn't gloat. He didn't demand an apology from the stuttering Gerald Preston. He simply turned back to face Marcus and Celeste on the stage. His voice was incredibly calm, but firm and absolute. "Congratulations again on your engagement," he said, the words echoing like a final verdict dropping in a courtroom. "But we will be leaving now." He gently took Elina's arm, and together they walked slowly, proudly, and gracefully toward the grand exit. The crowd of millionaires physically parted for them like the Red Sea. Lynn followed closely behind them, shaking her head in sheer disbelief at the absolute, catastrophic mess they were leaving behind. Once they were safely out in the opulent hotel lobby, Elina's pent-up, terrified feelings finally burst out of her. "I absolutely cannot believe they tried to publicly treat you like a fake con artist," she said, her eyes completely full of angry, protective tears. Lucien looked down at her incredibly gently, wiping a tear from her cheek. "I've seen much worse behavior from desperate people, Elina. Let's just go home." As they stepped outside under the bright city lights, waiting for their car, one terrifying thing became crystal clear to Elina. This ongoing feud wasn't just about her anymore. Marcus and Celeste's family had maliciously, deliberately tried to hurt and humiliate Lucien too. The game had fundamentally changed. It wasn't just about lingering feelings or the painful past now. It was entirely about power, ego, and control. And she knew, deep in her gut, that the next time they clashed, it wouldn't be quiet. The very next morning, the internet absolutely exploded. Everyone in the city was talking incessantly about the disastrous engagement party. Elite society blogs, financial forums, and local gossip pages posted aggressive, viral headlines. "Billionaire questioned at fancy party. Turns out he's the real deal." "Investor mistaken for wedding crasher. Fiancée's father causes massive scene at fancy engagement party." That was just one of the many sensational headlines circulating. Elina woke up in her bed to literally tons of frantic texts from Lynn. Her other friends sent blurry video clips taken from the back of the ballroom, pictures of Gerald Preston looking pale, and thousands of tweets. Hashtags like Ballroomgate and Who is Lucien were currently trending #1 locally. The internet simply couldn't get enough of the juicy, High society drama of old money embarrassing itself. Even Marcus had desperately called her phone late that night. He had left a pathetic, rambling voicemail. Elina had absolutely no plan to answer his calls ever again, but morbid curiosity won out, and she listened to the message anyway. Elina. Hey. Listen. I'm so incredibly sorry about what happened tonight. I honestly didn't know Celeste's father would do that or say those things. Maybe we could meet up and talk sometime soon? Just to clear things up. Let me know. She deleted the sad message right away without a second thought. The sound of his voice, which was once so incredibly, intimately close to her heart, now felt exactly like something from a completely different life. It was a permanently closed door to a toxic world she absolutely didn't want back. Now, the entire world knew exactly who Lucien really was. He wasn't just a kind, quiet, handsome man who liked art anymore. He was someone massively, globally powerful. He was someone who stood strong and unshakable in any intimidating room. And the internet loved the fact that he had handled the chaotic, insulting mess with absolute, chilling calm and grace. He never yelled, he never threw a tantrum, and he never showed a sliver of petty anger. That incredible display of quiet, restrained strength said infinitely more about his character than any viral news story ever could. That morning, Lucien invited Elina to come over to his penthouse for a quiet breakfast away from the noise. Over warm, buttery croissants and strong, dark coffee. They sat at the kitchen island and talked about the wild events of the night before. I guess the Preston family truly thinks I'm a fake grifter who just sweet-talked his way into high society. Lucien joked, taking a sip of coffee and shaking his head with a dry laugh. But Elina, who was incredibly perceptive, heard something hidden behind the laugh. Something deeply tired. Something that sounded a little bit hurt. "It's just not right," she said fiercely, holding her warm coffee mug in both hands. "You've helped so many people in the world with your charities and your investments. You shouldn't have to constantly prove yourself to awful, shallow people like that." Lucien gave a small, weary shrug. "Money makes things incredibly tricky, Elina," he said, staring into his cup. "People see a fortune, and they either want to desperately extract something from you, or they immediately think you're hiding something dark." He looked out the big, floor-to-ceiling window at the sprawling, glittering city skyline. For a second, he seemed incredibly far away, lost in the heavy burden of his success. Then, he reached across the marble counter for her hand. His thumb brushed soothingly over her fingers. "That's exactly why I prefer to stay completely quiet about it in my personal life. But I never, ever want you getting caught in the messy middle of the crossfire." Elina shook her head firmly. She squeezed his large hand gently, but with intense conviction. "I am so incredibly proud of you, Lucien. Every part of you. If anyone in this city has a problem with you, that is entirely their problem, not ours." Her voice was unshakable and steady, because she meant absolutely every single word she said. Lucien's dark, tired eyes softened beautifully. He leaned in across the counter and kissed her forehead softly. It was an incredibly gentle kiss, and it lingered for a long moment. Exactly like he wanted to say so much more than clumsy words could ever hold. Then, the peaceful moment was broken. His cell phone buzzed violently against the table. He picked it up, read the screen, and frowned deeply. "Is everything okay?" Elina asked. Her stomach instantly felt tight. The energy in the room had suddenly, noticeably changed. "Something's very wrong with a massive acquisition deal one of my tech companies is currently working on," Lucien explained, his voice turning strictly professional. "There's a legal snag. I might have to fly out to San Francisco tomorrow morning to handle it in person." Elina set down her coffee mug. A creeping sense of worry crept into her mind. "For how long will you be gone?" "A few days, maybe a full week. I'm honestly not sure yet." Lucien sighed heavily and rubbed the tense back of his neck in frustration. "I absolutely hate the timing of this. I really don't want to leave you right now. especially after everything chaotic that just happened last night. Elina gave him a soft, reassuring, brave smile. It's totally okay, Lucien. Go take care of your business empire. I will be perfectly fine here. They spent the rest of the rainy day walking quietly together through a large, leafy park and visiting a small, obscure art exhibit, intentionally staying far away from the news and completely ignoring the toxic gossip still spinning wildly around online. When she was with Lucien, Elina felt incredibly peaceful, exactly like they were an unbreakable team that could successfully face absolutely anything together. But deep inside her mind, a dark, nagging thought kept bothering her. She knew Marques intimately. He absolutely hated being second best to anyone. He always desperately needed to feel like he was in total control of his environment. And now that Lucien's name and the true, staggering extent of his wealth were public knowledge, Marques would definitely feel deeply, personally threatened by his existence. And she knew from painful experience that when Marques felt threatened, he always, invariably caused massive, destructive problems. Later that same day, just as Elina was packing up her bags and heading home from her design studio, her phone buzzed in her purse. A strange, unlisted number popped up on the caller ID screen. She hesitated for a long moment, her thumb hovering over the red button, then finally picked up. Elina. It's Celeste. The voice on the other end was quiet, incredibly shaky, but deadly serious. Can we please meet somewhere private? I desperately need to talk to you. It's about Marques. Elina's heart jumped into her throat. Why on earth would Celeste Raymond call her? Was this some kind of elaborate, vindictive trap? Some kind of cruel blame game about the ruined party? But Celeste didn't sound angry or arrogant at all. She sounded genuinely terrified. Elina cautiously agreed to meet her the very next day at a quiet, out-of-the-way tea shop. After she ended the call, she sat frozen at her desk, her stomach twisting into a sickening knot of anxiety. Celeste hadn't sounded proud or sharp. She had sounded completely desperate. Maybe that picture-perfect, diamond-encrusted-looking engagement was already starting to rapidly fall apart behind closed doors. And if it was violently falling apart, what dark, hidden truths about Marques might come spilling out next? The next day, heavy, dark gray clouds hung low and ominous over the city. Elina stepped cautiously into Marlowe's tea house in Midtown Manhattan. It was a very quiet, cozy spot with soft, ambient lights and the deeply comforting, herbal smell of fresh tea steeping. She picked a secluded, dark corner booth in the back and sat down, waiting nervously. Celeste walked in a few minutes later, looking like a ghost. She was wearing a heavy black trench coat tightly wrapped over a simple cream silk blouse. Her steps were slow and hesitant, and her manicured hands were slightly, visibly shaking as she took off her wet coat and draped it over the chair. "Thank you so much for agreeing to meet me," she said softly, sitting down across from Elina. Elina watched her very carefully. Celeste absolutely didn't look anything like the glowing, confident, arrogant bride-to-be from the engagement party just days ago. She looked utterly exhausted, pale, and defeated. "It's okay," Elina said gently, keeping her guard up, but her tone kind. "What's going on? Celeste?" A server came over to the table. Celeste nervously asked for a calming chamomile tea. Elina ordered a strong Earl Grey. They sat in a highly awkward, heavy silence until the server finally dropped off the cups and left them alone. Celeste looked down at the wooden table, unable to meet Elina's eyes. "I know this might sound incredibly strange, coming to his ex-wife, but I honestly don't have many people in my life I can actually talk to about Marques." She paused, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "He never, ever talks about you, but I looked into the court records. I know exactly how your marriage ended. It sounded incredibly fast, and incredibly painful." Elina's stomach tightened defensively. "What exactly do you want to know?" Celeste held her hands tightly together in her lap. Her knuckles turned bone white. It looked exactly like she was desperately trying to hold back her own rising fear. Is he? Is he always like this? So incredibly, suffocatingly controlling? Her voice was soft, but it was full of a deep, agonizing frustration. I've seen tiny warning signs and red flags before. But last night, what he intentionally did to your boyfriend. He wasn't actually mad at my father for making that phone call. He was mad because someone else in the room got more respect and attention than him. We fought terribly after the party. It was bad. Her bottom lip shook just a little bit before she violently bit down on it, pulling her crumbling composure back together. Elina looked at her carefully, a wave of profound sympathy washing over her. That exact, haunted, terrified look in Celeste's eyes. She knew it intimately. She had once seen that exact same look staring back at her in her own bathroom mirror reflection. There was absolutely no point in lying to protect Marcus's reputation anymore. Marcus always has to win, Elina said gently, leaning forward. At first, when I met him, he was just driven, smart, and highly ambitious. But then, as he got more successful, absolutely everything in life became a ruthless contest to him. If I didn't perfectly meet his impossible expectations, he would systematically, verbally tear me down until I felt like nothing. Her voice grew tight, not with fresh anger, but with the heavy, sad memories of being emotionally abused. He didn't treat me like an equal partner in life. He treated me like I was just a disposable part of his grand business plan. Celeste's eyes filled instantly with hot tears, but she blinked very quickly. She clearly wasn't ready to let them fall in a public place. I'm starting to see that toxic side of him too, she whispered brokenly. After the disastrous party, he walked around my father's penthouse yelling and throwing things. He screamed that he'd never let some nobody make him look weak in public. I calmly told him that Lucien clearly isn't a nobody, and Marcus got even angrier and more explosive. She looked down at her tea, her voice shaking badly. I have my own family money. I have massive political connections. But Marcus wants so much more than that. He wants to actively use me to help him climb over everyone else. The heartbreaking words hit the table like a heavy, undeniable truth. Elina felt something twist painfully inside her chest. She vividly remembered how incredibly charming Marcus could be in the beginning, how he could easily make you believe you were building something massive and important together, right up until you realized you were the only one holding the entire, crushing weight of it all up on your shoulders. So, why talk to me? Elina asked gently. Celeste looked nervously around the tea shop, her eyes darting as if she were checking for someone listening in on them. Even in this quiet, cozy, safe place, she looked like a hunted animal. Because I don't know if I can actually marry him anymore, she confessed, her voice breaking. And I desperately need to know, has Marcus ever done anything highly shady or illegal with money? Or anything else? She paused, taking a shaky breath, then spoke barely above a whisper. My father is heavily pressuring me to go through with the wedding to save face in the press after the scandal, but I'm genuinely scared of him. Elina's thoughts flashed violently backward in time. She remembered the terrifying late-night money fights. She remembered how Marcus had once aggressively pushed her to illegally use her business savings for one of his highly risky, off-the-books projects. When she bravely said no, he had screamed at her, calling her small-minded, stupid, and selfish. That was just the beginning of the end. I don't know for sure if what he did was technically illegal, Elina said slowly, measuring her words carefully. But he always twisted contracts and manipulated situations to get exactly what he wanted. And someone else usually paid the terrible price for his ambition. Celeste looked simultaneously incredibly relieved to have her fears validated and deeply, terribly worried. The truth wasn't always comforting. I see, she said quietly. Their hot teas arrived. Celeste stirred hers mechanically without speaking. The heavy, loaded silence between them said absolutely everything that needed to be said. Celeste stirred her tea slowly, not really looking at the swirling liquid. He's aggressively pushing me to sign an ironclad prenup, she confessed softly. one that gives him almost all of the financial control in the marriage. It's heavily tied to future money he expects from my father's business deals. Elina's eyes widened in sheer shock. Celeste, that is a massive, screaming red flag. I know, Celeste whispered, her voice shaking violently now. He wants me to sign it blindly before we even pick an official wedding date. My father says it's just smart, aggressive corporate planning, but it doesn't feel right to me. And after what happened at the party, seeing how violently angry he got over Lucien, I realized I don't even really know the man I'm about to marry. Elina felt a deep, overwhelming wave of true sympathy. As much agony and pain as Marques had maliciously caused her in the past. She could clearly see that Celeste was currently caught like a fly in a highly toxic, dangerous web. You have absolutely every right to feel unsure and scared, Elina said gently, reaching across the table to touch Celeste's arm. She paused, then added with fierce sincerity, "Listen to me. If you ever need someone to talk to who understands him, or if you just need a safe place to hide and clear your head, you can call me anytime. I am not against you. Marques is just a part of my past." Celeste lowered her head, a single tear finally dropping onto the table. "Thank you so much. That really means a lot to me." They both sipped their hot tea quietly for a few minutes. After a while, Celeste spoke again, finding a tiny sliver of resolve. "I'm going to talk to him tonight. I'm thinking about formally asking to delay the wedding entirely, until I feel more sure about the contracts. I don't know how violently he'll react to being told no." Elina remembered entirely too well how terrifyingly fast Marques's smooth charm could curdle and turn into explosive anger when he was challenged or denied what he wanted. "Be incredibly careful," she said firmly, looking Celeste in the eye. "Marques absolutely hates losing control of a situation. Make sure you have people around you when you do it. People you completely trust." Celeste nodded slowly, taking the advice to heart. Her eyes looked watery and frightened again. "I will." She took a deep breath. "And Elina, about what happened at the party. I am really, truly sorry about my father's behavior. He ignorantly thought Lucien was just a grifter using me to get to our family money, but he was wrong. Very, very wrong." Elina gave a small, forgiving smile. "Apology accepted, Celeste. Don't worry about it." They paid the bill and walked out of the warm tea shop together. The dark clouds above the city looked heavy, threatening to unleash a torrential downpour. Celeste walked quickly down the street toward a waiting car, pulling her expensive coat tight around her shivering shoulders. Elina stood perfectly still, watching her go. Her heart felt incredibly full of sadness for the woman, deep worry for her safety, and a small, profound sense of inner peace for herself. She had successfully made it out of that nightmare alive. But her intuition told her that this chaotic situation wasn't over. Marques, when aggressively pushed into a corner and threatened with losing his prize, could be unbelievably cruel. If Celeste bravely chose to stand up to him tonight, she might finally see the terrifying side of him that Elina knew all too well. The dark, unforgiving side that held grudges forever. The very next morning, Elina was violently awakened by a rapid barrage of text messages from Lynn. Her cell phone buzzed nonstop against the nightstand, vibrating right off the edge. Still half asleep and groggy, she blindly grabbed the TV remote and turned on the local news channel. A massive, bright red breaking news banner flashed urgently across the bottom of the screen. Prominent investor Marques Varela under federal investigation for massive corporate fraud. Elina sat straight up in bed, gasping. Just days after his big, arrogant, high society engagement party, Marques was now actively being investigated by the authorities for committing serious, multi-million-dollar money crimes. The grim news headlines completely covered the television screen. Marques Varela under investigation for fraud. Allegedly used fiancée's wealthy family to make illegal, insider gains. Elina sat frozen against her headboard, watching the devastating report unfold. Her mind swirled dizzily with a complex hurricane of feelings. Absolute shock, profound relief, and surprisingly something deeply sad too. She had truly, fiercely loved this man once upon a time, and now the spectacle of his complete, utter ruin was being broadcast everywhere. His handsome face, his sprawling web of lies, his fatal, greedy mistakes. It wasn't just a public downfall. It was a cinematic, spectacular destruction of a life. Her phone rang loudly in her hand. It was Lynn. "It's everywhere," Lynn practically screamed into the phone, completely out of breath with excitement. "He is completely, utterly finished in this town. All of his major investors are running for the hills. Gerald Preston officially pulled all of his political and financial support this morning." Then she paused, lowering her voice dramatically. "And get this juicy detail. Celeste is the one who gave the federal investigators the hard proof. She completely turned on him, Al." Elina sat in stunned silence, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She had actually done it. Celeste had bravely stood up to him and burned his empire down. Before she could even process the magnitude of the news, another call beeped in on call waiting. It was a restricted, unlisted number. She switched over, answering cautiously, and instantly froze. "Elina." It was Marcus. His usually smooth, arrogant voice was raw, ragged, and absolutely terrified. "I have absolutely nothing left," he sobbed pathetically into the phone. "The feds froze all of my bank accounts. Celeste is gone. She took everything. I need your help, Elina. Please." She could hear the sheer, unadulterated panic vibrating in his voice, the sound of a proud man completely falling apart at the seams. She heard the frantic rustling of paper sounds, heavy, pacing footsteps, and absolute chaos echoing in the background of the call. "Marcus," she said slowly, her voice dropping to a calm, icy register. "I am not your wife anymore. Whatever terrible things you did to those investors, if you broke the federal law, that is entirely on you to fix." He laughed, a jagged, bitter, slightly hysterical sound. "Everyone is turning their backs on me. All these rich, fake people. They only care about you when you're winning. I just tried to play the game by their exact rules. And now they're making me the bad guy. Even you're selfishly walking away when I need you most." Then, sensing he was losing control, his tone turned vicious and cold. "Do you honestly think Lucien and his billions will always be there to fix things for you when you fail?" Elina stayed perfectly, terrifyingly calm. His toxic, venomous words didn't sting her soul anymore. They held absolutely no power over her. "My life is no longer tied to yours in any way. Marcus," she said firmly, "do not ever call this number again." Her hand shook just a tiny little bit as she pressed the red button and ended the call, but she wasn't shaking from lingering fear. She was shaking from the massive, overwhelming rush of absolute, total freedom. The silence in her apartment afterward felt completely different than it ever had before. It wasn't an empty, lonely silence. It was deeply, profoundly peaceful. She had finally, truly let go of the heavy baggage. Marcus was no longer a terrifying ghost haunting the corners of her life. He was just a sad, cautionary lesson from her distant past. And now, she could finally take a deep breath. 2 quiet days later, Lucien finally returned from his stressful business trip in San Francisco. As the private elevator chimed and opened, and he walked exhausted into the penthouse carrying his bag, Elina rushed eagerly toward him. Her purse dropped carelessly to the floor. She threw her arms around his neck and wrapped him in a tight hug. He dropped his bag and held her fiercely tight, his long fingers soft and soothing in her dark hair. "I missed you so much," he said gently, kissing the side of her head. They walked over and sat down together on the plush velvet sofa. Elina held both of his hands in hers. "Lucien," she said softly, looking into his tired eyes, "while you were gone on your trip, Marcus's entire life completely fell apart. She sat there and told him absolutely everything that had happened. She told him about the breaking news of the federal investigation. She told him that Celeste had bravely left him and turned him into the authorities. And he's been calling my phone frantically, begging me for financial help, she finished. Lucien's dark eyes narrowed instantly with deep, protective concern. He actually called you directly? Elina nodded slowly. He begged me for money, to help him hire a better defense lawyer. I said no. It felt a little cold in the moment, but I absolutely cannot let him try to pull me back down into his toxic chaos. Lucien let out a long, heavy breath. The immense relief showed clearly in his handsome eyes. I am so incredibly proud of you, Elina, he said, his voice thick with emotion. You did the exact right thing. Setting that hard, final boundary with him took immense strength. He reached out and cupped her face gently in his hand. If you ever feel unsafe, or if he threatens you, I will do whatever I have to do, absolutely whatever it takes, to protect you. They spent the rest of the long afternoon talking safely on the couch. They went over all the dramatic details of the scandal, the shocking news stories, and how incredibly fast it all had spread across the globe. Even the major financial gossip sites were talking about the stark differences, heavily comparing Lucien's quiet, dignified strength and philanthropy with Marques's loud, desperate, and spectacular public fall from grace. Elina hated being part of the peripheral gossip, but Lucien stayed perfectly calm and unbothered. It'll pass, my love, he said reassuringly, kissing her forehead. The news cycle always does. That evening, wanting to celebrate his return, they attended a beautiful, low-key charity art auction supporting underprivileged local artists in the city. The gallery space was modern, sleek, and brilliantly bright. Cameras flashed rapidly near the entrance as they walked in hand. Since the infamous engagement party, Lucien was now widely known publicly as one of the city's most generous and powerful donors. Elina felt a little bit nervous under the sudden barrage of media attention, but Lucien leaned in close and whispered affectionately, Relax. Darling, we're just here for something good tonight. Encouraged by his warmth, she relaxed her shoulders and walked gracefully through the gallery. She stopped dead in her tracks in front of a massive, abstract painting. It was full of vibrant color, explosive life, and undeniable strength. It looked exactly like freedom. Lucien noticed her absolute awe. Quietly, without making a scene, he outbid absolutely everyone else in the room for the piece, and gifted the massive painting to her later that night with a soft, satisfied smile. Later that weekend, they hosted a small, intimate cocktail party at Lucien's penthouse. They joyfully celebrated both Elina's massive new boutique hotel design project and her beautiful new painting. Lynn arrived early, throwing her arms around Elina and hugging her tight. Over glasses of wine, Lynn gleefully shared the very latest. Juicy updates on Marques's ruin, his cancelled corporate contracts, furious investors filing lawsuits, and even more devastating headlines. A very small, empathetic part of Elina still felt a tiny bit sorry for the destruction of a human life, but a much bigger, wiser part of her knew with absolute certainty that she had made the exact right choice in leaving him. After all the happy guests had finally left for the night, Elina and Lucien sat quietly together in the soft, romantic light of the living room. The millions of city lights sparkled brilliantly through the big floor-to-ceiling windows. The colorful new painting now hung proudly on the stark white wall. Elina held a half-empty glass of red wine and looked out at the sprawling, infinite skyline. She felt something profound that she hadn't truly felt in years. Absolute, unshakable peace. There would be no more shrinking herself to fit into small spaces. No more living in constant fear of criticism. No more desperately trying to make herself small just to keep someone else feeling big and important. She turned on the couch to look at Lucien. He was already watching her with that familiar, warm, incredibly tender look that she'd come to love so deeply. I never, ever thought I'd be sitting here, she said quietly, her voice full of emotion. Just a year ago, I was still broken on the floor, trying to heal from the divorce. Now, absolutely everything in the world feels possible. Lucien reached gently for her hand and pressed a soft kiss to her knuckles. "You deserve a true partner who actually sees your brilliance, Elina," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Not one who constantly tries to take it away from you out of jealousy." Then he smiled, just a little awry, handsome smile. "As for my money or my family name or the media, I want you to know this." He looked right into the depths of her eyes. "I deeply admire your fierce strength and your independence. I am always here for you to lean on. But you've already shown me and the world that you can powerfully stand on your own 2 feet." His beautiful, sincere words wrapped around her tired heart like a warm, heavy blanket, and every last, lingering piece of doubt she had ever carried completely melted away into nothingness. Together, they stood up and walked over to stand by the massive window. The sprawling city stretched far and wide before them, millions of lights flickering, cars moving like tiny rivers of light, vibrant life pulsing endlessly in every single direction. Night had fully fallen over New York. But inside Lucien's secure, beautiful home, there was absolute calm. It was a profound peace that wasn't simply given to her. It was a peace she had fiercely, bravely earned. Elina leaned her head lovingly on Lucien's broad shoulder. Her thoughts drifted momentarily back to the timid, frightened woman she once was. The weak woman who constantly shrank herself to appease Marques's ego. The terrified woman who falsely thought that being completely quiet would magically keep the peace in a toxic home. That broken woman was completely, permanently gone. Now she stood incredibly tall. She had successfully, brilliantly rebuilt her shattered life from the ground up. She had found immense joy and purpose in her architectural work again. She had bravely opened her scarred heart to a good man who actively lifted her up to the sky instead of aggressively pushing her down into the dirt. She had masterfully created something entirely new from the ground up. Her solid ground, her beautiful design, her unshakable strength. Down below the glass, the massive city kept moving forward. It was loud, chaotic, busy, and wildly alive. But up here, high above the noise, in this quiet, perfect, intimate moment, Elina felt something deep inside her soul permanently shift. Freedom. It was not just freedom from Marques's toxic grip, but freedom from the exhausting, lifelong need to constantly prove herself to the world. It was freedom from the crushing weight of always needing to be enough for people who would never appreciate her. She was completely done looking back at the past. Now, she only looked ahead to the bright future, holding tightly to the hand of a man who deeply respected her ambitious dreams, her need for space, and her powerful voice. Lucien didn't need to say much to prove his devotion. He didn't have to make grand, loud declarations. His profound love showed effortlessly in the quiet way he always stayed by her side, the way he truly listened to her, and the way he implicitly believed in her. Thank you so much for walking beside Elina on this incredible, emotional journey through deep heartbreak, toxic lies, immense personal growth, and ultimate healing. She didn't just barely survive a painful chapter of her life. She bravely, actively chose to rise from the ashes. She completely let go of the heavy baggage that hurt her, and she fiercely chose to love herself. Her incredible strength wasn't loud, bitter, or angry. It was deeply calm, crystal clear, and completely free. She rebuilt her beautiful new life not with a petty desire for revenge, but with a profound desire for lasting peace. And maybe in the end, that is the most powerful, victorious choice of all. Dear reader, life doesn't always go exactly the way we hope and plan. The people we trust will sometimes let us down terribly, and grand plans will inevitably fall apart. But we are never, ever without power in our own lives. Every single day, we get to actively choose exactly who we want to become after the storm passes. This wasn't just Elina's story of redemption. It might very well be your story too. If even one small piece of this incredible journey spoke to your heart today, we sincerely hope you'll share this video with someone in your life who really needs to hear that they're not alone in their struggles. We're so incredibly glad you were here with us today. Please remember to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more empowering stories that touch the soul. You matter more than you know, and you are infinitely stronger than you think. See you in the next story.